I think another interesting question related to what you were saying is, since all these things are speeding up, we have the web is transferring information, communication is so available, we have IM, video, there's so many ways. So what are ways to take advantage of this, instead of having it be a detriment to you, what are ways to take advantage of all this increase in speed and increase in globalization?
The main useful thing is to understand what is causing all this change, what is causing the acceleration, what is causing this complexity. When we understand that the single most important difference between a few hundred years ago and today in human lives is simply the availability of information generated somewhere through some experience becoming available among more human beings through books or through these media like television or the internet. That acceleration of information is what is driving this whole thing. Because the more you know, the more you can imagine with what you know. The more you can imagine, the more options are open to you. The more ways there are to act on them. And the more ways we act, the more ways the world changes. The more ways the world changes, the more new knowledge there is to be had. Because things are changing, and that is noticed, and that's observed, and that's stored, and that's learning. So when we realize that there is an ecology to human behavior that comes from both not only consciousness, but the impact of emotion upon the consciousness in terms of attraction to or repulsion to what has been experienced. The storing of what has been experienced as memory becoming knowledge. The processing of what was experienced into understanding, into relationship with other things one knows, towards wisdom and clarity. That processing, the processing of this experience into new possibilities, which I mentioned earlier, which gives rise to new options. All of this processing is happening in each of us. And this gives rise to actions, which gives rise to the transformation in our society accelerating from one generation to the next. So whereas it's just 30 years ago, the life that a person had would be not very different from one's parents' life. Today, the life that one generation has is very different from the previous generation. And we are getting to a pace where in one's own lifetime, each decade will be a different kind of work environment, different kinds of technologies involved, different kinds of communications to get information from and to other people. So this acceleration means the most important thing is for us to understand how this all works together. So when we realize how these things work together, we realize that there is a flux to things. That even though it looks now that the trees and the plants and our bodies and the table here are all still, there's actually currents flowing. People's desires and aspirations are currents of energy behind which each person will invest energy. And therefore, these are just like there's wind which can be harnessed for wind energy, and there is water which can be harnessed for water energy and give rise to electricity. There is momentum in the energy of people's desires and fears, because they will invest energy in either moving towards their desires, the fulfillment of their desires, or moving away from the possibility of their fears happening. And so when we realize we are living in a dynamic reality in which all the desires and fears of individuals and organizations are currents, and that all that we are expected to accomplish in an organization or by our employer or by our clients is to bring about some change that they are paying us for. Then finding out which currents are best suited to accomplishing a change for which we're being paid becomes the smart way to do things.